When you say that those documents were not given, they were not tendered, but they were hacked and brought to the fore, that does suggest that the documents were actually there and that they were true, but it's the hackers who brought it to the fore. Is that what you intended to say?
These are possibilities, Chamberlain. Our records are not safe. The only safe record in this country sometimes can be the analog records. But even that, with a little egunje in the local parlance, you can get someone to make copies of documents for you. But we must be serious the way we do things. Those documents that were published out there were not given freely.
So you mean they were true documents?
And presented to the online publishers with a clear intention to embarrass and distract the COAS and the Nigerian military.
Well, let's bring this other perspective about, well, not just the documents now, some of the recent activities and how security agents have handled them. You've got quite a number now. You've got the IPOB, you've got the Avengers, you've got the herdsmen. So all those issues, different people have different perspectives. Many of them say, well, not exactly satisfied with the way they have been handled previously. Do you share that thought?
Well, let me just say that all the activities of the groups you mentioned are self-inflicted injuries by the various communities who feel discontented. Let me start first with the IPOB. I was once a Biafran, and I have the legitimacy to claim so, having been a child soldier with a mortal wound on my right ankle. But that was an era that ended in 1970. There was an article of surrender, and there were signatures, and the name Biafra was prescribed. It is in spirit. Now, we were given a promise of 3 R's: rehabilitation, reintegration, and reconstruction. There are many today that will argue that the 3 R's were never delivered. I beg to differ. We had an administrator called Dr. Abi Asika. The federal government at that particular point in time, it was a different era. They didn't have to create a Southeast Rehabilitation Center. Funds were increased, the budgetary allocation to the then East Central State were used to reconstruct the schools. We were quickly reintegrated into the system. All our properties in the north and in the west were returned back to us, except in Rivers State. Because of the rehabilitation and reintegration program effected, we provided a vice president to this nation 9 years after that civil war. So when we say that we are being marginalized, I beg to differ.
What about the third R?
Yes, there is some injustices that we can claim, such as the fact that 5 states against 6 in other areas and lower local government. But that was military era. It takes a longer period and more argument to give us extra state in National Assembly.
You seem to have missed out on
I asked our politicians to go forward and lobby their colleagues to get these things.
Mr. Gbanite,
so those young men in IPOB who constitute themselves to a cost problem for the community.
Can you hear me, Mr. Gbanite? Yeah, you mentioned the 2
yes,
R's.
I can hear you.
What about the third R?
The third R being the reintegration. We are reintegrated.
Reconstruction.
We are everywhere in the nation. Any local government that doesn't have an Igbo man is a very wicked local government.
No, I meant reconstruction.
A majority of our men who make their money made it outside Igbo land than in Igbo land. There are businessmen in Kano, in Lagos, in Niger State, in Kaduna State, all very prosperous. And we have more Igbos living outside Igbo land than any other ethnic group living in Igbo land.
So what?
Isn't that because
what these young
the last
men ought to do is
let me come in here. Chamberlain has been asking question, maybe you didn't get that. Isn't that because the last R, which is Reconstruction, hasn't happened in the region? That is why we have seen a huge amount of people from the region go outside?
Look, the Reconstruction you're talking about, under the military era, the roads in the southeast were motorable. They were reconstructed. There was Federal Ministry of Agriculture. Every federal ministry had an office in Enugu. Since 1999, the coal corporation went dead because the governors of the southeast became indolent. Nobody questioned the federal government why the coal corporation should die. Now we have Niger in Nkalago, which is owned by Ebonyi State. An indigene of Igbo wants to buy it, but the citizens of indigenes of Ebonyi State refuse because the gentleman is from Anambra State. They want Dangote to come and buy it. Dangote does not want to buy it. Who is marginalizing who? We are marginalizing ourselves by not taking responsibility for what we are supposed to do for the Southeast first and then for the nation.
All right, let me bring this
then
in
we
because
have
we need to factor a lot in because of our
that has been there for almost 3 terms.
Mr.
And then, just a minute, and we had a senator,
we may not have time
a senator that was
issues.
in charge of Senate Committee, Ministry of Works.
Now, we're trying
Hear me, Chamberlain, please.
We're trying to
and if you come to 9 Mile,
Mr. Gbanite, just a minute. If you go that way, you may not have time to speak on some of the other matters, so just let it go back and forth. Well, speak about the Avengers, because that's the, of course, most recent one now. All of those agitations, in fact, you do know that several groups have popped up in the region, also agitating for a thing or the other.
The Avengers are opportunists. These are young men who grew up to see the likes of Atake Tom, Asari Dokubo, Tom Polo become billionaires. And they also feel that they were excluded from the era of militancy disarmament, demobilization, and rehabilitation. Therefore, they see an opportunity to again hold federal government to ransom. And I think I commend the president for the first step he's taking now in terms of talking to the traditional rulers in that particular area to be able to dialogue with them. Dialogue is always very important, but a government must never negotiate from a position of weakness. Government must negotiate from a position of strength. Even the issue of the IPOB, the government should also invite the elders of the Southeast, both governors and clergy, and discuss this and find out how to ameliorate this problem. And it can be done, it can be discussed, and this issue of IPOB can be quieted. The Avengers in this case, I would be surprised if the naval intelligence who were operating under the Operation Polio Shield did not do their due diligence by keeping intelligence on all the actors in that particular region, so that it is easier to go to X, Y, Z and say, who is doing this? What is this all about? And be able to pick those people up. That area also, the Focados area, is also as vast as the Northeast. And the Delta regions is so difficult to navigate, and that means we need special funding for our national security, for the government to be able to put the Nigerian Navy to be able to properly navigate both the blue and brown waters.
All right, let's wrap up with this. Let's wrap up with this perspective. There's also a huge question mark because many still speak about the human rights perspective in terms of how the military, how security agencies carry out their functions. There's been several reports about, I know they always deny the ones about Amnesty International saying no, they don't actually take into cognizance all the facts of the matter. But you also have those who still say that, well, their rights have been abused, either the way they were arrested, clamped into detention for several weeks without a fair hearing. So all those rights issues are consistently being raised.
I think Nigeria is specially targeted by Amnesty International. Under the current Chief of Army Staff, a desk has been set up in the Nigerian military. Again, the Civil Military Relationship Group department headed by Major General Nicholas Rogers is an example of that. Nigeria is really, I would say, a Cinderella when it comes to human rights violation compared to the Western nations. We know about Abu Ghraib, we know of Guantanamo Bay, we know of what has happened in special rendition in the fight against terrorism. This thing called terrorism is new to the international community. And sometimes you need to do certain things in order to get actionable intelligence. And don't forget that the military are human beings like you and I. And they enter territories that are unknown. And they have to do what is necessary to secure their own safety first. And sometimes we have belligerent arrestees who abuse both police officers, military officers in the process of arrest and detention. And funny things do happen. So nobody is an angel. The army are not angels. The police are not angels. But I must tell you that our own military, compared to their counterparts all over the world, are better than any other military. Why is it that outside Nigeria in peace support operation, Nigerian military have not been accused of rape, have not been accused of high-handedness in those operations compared to what is being accused of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other peace supporters? Nigerian military, we must again support our military. But what I have noticed, and I think the military need to take note of this, especially the Office of National Security Advisor.
Well, the thing about that is
to have a conference
between
the security agencies
in
and
the same
journalists
breath
in this country.
In the same breath, you have many who will always tell you that when they travel with some Nigerians who, when they get to outside the shores of this country, they behave themselves, but when they come back, as soon as they land the airport, you see a new kind of person being displaying certain character. But that's, unfortunately, we can't expatiate a little further on that one. We appreciate your comment on this morning. Max Gbanite, strategic security consultant.